food banks are back in the spotlight in the East Midlands this week. Jeremy Corbyn paid a private visit to one at Heanor in Derbyshire that's seen the number of people using it soar after a nearby company went bust. And guest John Ashworth says numbers are also rising at food banks in Leicester as universal credit's being rolled out. John, what is the situation in Leicester with food banks?
Well, we're one of the cities that is introducing the universal credit early, and it's for a particular group of people. It's single people who would have been on JSA. And what the food banks in my Leicester South constituency have told me is that in the last sort of 15 days that we've had universal credit, they've seen a real spike in demand at the food banks because of universal credit, because there's a time lag by when you apply for universal credit and when you actually get the benefit. So we're seeing huge increase in the food banks in Leicester. It's a shame. It's a disgrace, really.
You're worried by that?
Oh, I am worried. I mean, really, in this day and age, people shouldn't have to rely on emergency food parcels, but because of the way the benefits system is changing with sanctions and delays, increasingly people who are often in work, that's not necessarily what you see in the tabloids, but these are people who are in jobs are having to turn to food banks.
This is worrying to hear, isn't it, Nick Rushton?
Well, in Leicestershire, we haven't experienced that as yet. It's early days. But I agree with the principle of the universal credit because it saves people from applying for half a dozen credits. It helps people to get the credits they need to move into work.
But those people are now reliant on food banks.
Not so much in Leicestershire, they're not. I mean, it is very early days, as John says. It's only just been introduced. My wife has volunteered at one. I know they're about. We have a scheme in the county council as well where we've put money in to help people out and point them in the right direction.
There are 27 in Leicester.
There may well be. I think there's a few in the county as well. I know there's in Colville, I know there's some in Loughborough, but we do try and help people that need them. But I do agree with the principle of the universal credit to get people into work so they can still actually claim the benefits when they're in work, and it must be simpler having one credit than six.
OK, we'll leave that one there. But what have Cornwall, Cumbria and Mansfield got in common? A survey found they have the happiest populations in Britain. It might seem an unusual accolade for Mansfield, a town more associated with stories of deprivation and job losses. It's also somewhere that shunned party politics by electing independents to run the local council. Helen McCulloch has been to meet its leader.
This really is one independent woman, and one who's making big changes. Kate Alsop is the elected mayor of Mansfield, and proud to be independent.
I don't have to waste time talking about national politicians and trying to defend some of their indefensible decisions. And that's great, because that means I spend the whole time thinking about Mansfield and doing what's right for Mansfield. It's the most liberating way to be a politician.
Today, she's meeting a couple who've been helped by her new housing policy.
Thank you very much for inviting me to your home.
Come on in, please.
Steve Canning and his wife Rachel have just moved into a new council bungalow.
We've never looked back since we come in. Everything's on one floor, you don't need anything else. Don't miss the stairs whatsoever. We came out of a 3-bedroom house. It was no good for us, because the bedrooms are 3 different floors. And since me and wife coming here, it's absolutely marvellous.
It's one of 17 homes being built to free up larger council houses for families, a scheme that's been nominated for a national award. Just part of the attention that Mansfield's been getting. The money the council receives from central government has been cut by 70% since 2010, and yet despite that, councillors have voted to freeze council tax for the 6th year in a row, and this place is getting a £100,000 facelift. But not everyone's impressed. Labour say there are still high levels of poverty here. Sandy Lane was named one of the most deprived streets in the country, and raising council tax rather than freezing it would help.
A 2% increase for most people in Mansfield would mean a raise of less than £3 a year, which is a very small amount of money. It's pennies a month. And I think that when we think about that in the context of protecting our assets, keeping our parks and green spaces, protecting services, I think that's a price that most of us would willingly pay, actually.
Now, the council are freezing their council tax for the 6th year in a row. Would that help you out at all, do you think? Do you think it makes any difference?
Not a grand difference, really. When you look in the grand scheme of things, everything else goes up. Council tax being froze, rent's going to go up. It's not going to make much difference.
Council tax hasn't gone up.
Does that make a difference?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, definitely now we're both retired, yeah.
And Labour suspect that Kate and her fellow councillors on the Mansfield Independence Forum aren't all that independent.
Kate Alsop, who's the current mayor, is an ex-Tory and stood as a Conservative and was elected as a Conservative in the past. So her political leanings are probably different to mine, I think it's fair to say.
Wherever the mayor's views land on the political spectrum, this independent woman says other councils would benefit from following Mansfield's lead.
Mansfield is the third happiest place to live. So if you know that your district council isn't going to be taking more money out of your purse for the next 4 years, then that makes you happy, doesn't it?
Kate Alsop there in Mansfield all sounds very happy. Now, Nick, as a county council leader who's increasing his council tax by 4%, what do you make of Mansfield freezing theirs?
Well, excuse me, Mansfield is a small borough council. It doesn't have the responsibilities that we've got. It doesn't deal with adult social care and it doesn't deal with children. They're the most expensive services we provide.
So you're saying it's easy for them to do that?
Well, my own district council, North West Leicester District Council, which is similar to that, but no mayor hasn't increased its rates for 7 years either.
John Ashworth, what do you make of the Mansfield model?
Oh, I mean, what a joke. I mean, these guys, no disrespect, they're Tories. They've just not got the guts to stand in Mansfield as Tories. And Kate Alsop going over the happiest place. When you look at the other reports that have come out, skills, bottom of the league, one of the worst towns for low pay, social mobility, one of the worst places in the country for social mobility. That is because of 10 years of independent, pretend Tories running the council.
Well, why aren't you running it then?
Well, I've supported the various Labour candidates in Mansfield over the years. We've had some great candidates like Steve Yem and Martin Lee, and members of my family have stood for Mansfield Council on a Labour ticket, and I worked hard to get them elected, but they weren't successful. But these independents, they're a bunch of jokers. They're Tories, really. They should stand with blue rosettes. And,
getting elected though, aren't they?
Well, that's because they're running in. Kate Alsop knows if she ran in Mansfield as a Tory, it's all right standing in Berry Hill or wherever it is, where the Tories do get elected, but in the rest of Mansfield, she knows she wouldn't get elected if she had a blue rosette on.
Nick Rushton, what do you make of this?
He knows a lot more about Mansfield than I do.
My wife's from Mansfield, that's what...
Personally, I've met the lady and she's very hospitable, and I think she's doing a reasonable job running a
Tory
district
in
council.
disguise, he says.
I honestly don't know the lady that well. She spoke at East Midlands Council the other week and she certainly stuck up for Mansfield.
Well, they're building a lot of council homes there. They've sold land, they're investing in property. I think a hotel in Edinburgh. It's all quite creative, isn't it?
It is. Even my own district council will be building council houses again this year.
So are there things that you can learn from that? I know you've been saying all the things you've been saying, but are there lessons to be learned in Mansfield by the way they're doing things?
Well, I mean, Nick's right. This is a district council, so they have a different set of responsibilities to the bigger county councils or the city councils. And what my concern is about the latest local government settlement, I know Nick will be happy because Leicestershire have done a bit better than expected, but Leicester City, again, getting big cuts, and I don't think that's fair for the more deprived areas in the cities like Leicester and Nottingham, who I think are losing out, again, to the county councils.
OK, well, let's make it very clear here that Kate Alsop is definitely independent. Now, we know that city councils and county councils across the East Midlands are facing huge budget cuts, but the government's offered some cash help this week. Let's just take a look at the figures. It's called Transitional Relief Funding. It means Leicestershire will get an extra £6.6 million over the next 2 years. Nottinghamshire will get £4 million and Derbyshire just over £2 million. So £6.6 million as far as you're concerned, Nick Rushton. Will that make much of a difference? It sounds a lot of money.
It's the first time the government have actually listened to us because we are the second lowest funded council in the country now, apart from Lincolnshire. So I thank my MPs and they have worked hard with me, lobbying ministers to get what we've got. And of course, £6 million makes a difference.
What kind of difference?
Well, for a start off this year, for instance, I won't have to make the savage cuts that I was going to have to make in maintaining the roads. We can put some money back into highway maintenance.
But of course, John, there's nothing here for our city councils.
No, and Sir Peter Salisbury, who does a tremendous job as our mayor, has had to grapple with millions and millions of pounds worth of cuts, and he's going to have to grapple with millions of pounds worth of cuts going forward. So my concern about the local government announcements this week from the government is it looks like they're kind of looking after the more Tory shire areas, but us Labour city areas are getting hit again.
So, Nick, is it fair? Because Labour have estimated that 50% of the extra cash is going to the South East and South West, and only 14% to the East and West Midlands.
It's true, but it's true.
But is that fair?
Well, we can't analyse. We can't make head nor tail of it. Surrey gets 12 million, we get 6. But what the main thing that they have promised is they are going to do a complete review of local government funding because it is absolutely unintelligible and broken beyond belief. And I do admit that places like Leicester City do require more government help than the Shire. But you can't actually work it out or analyse the figures and find out who gets what and for why.
Why not?
I honestly don't know. I think it's been tinkered around with for so long by so many politicians that it's unintelligible. So I want to work with other county councils, and I'll certainly work with Sir Peter in the city, to look at the formula to make sure that we get our fair share.
What would you do? What would Labour do? Would you take money from Leicestershire and give it to a Labour authority?
Well, I think local government finance should reflect the deprivation and the social needs in an area. I'm not saying they're not deprivation and social needs, of course there are in Leicestershire, but we in Leicester have huge issues around deprivation. We've still got one of the highest child poverty levels in the country, so I think that should be a heavier part of the weighting when they come to make funding decisions. And look, I mean, I'm sure Peter and
But where
Nick
does the money come from?
It's a big block from government, isn't it? But of course, some of the changes the government are going to introduce, like the devolution of business rates, that's going to hurt some more deprived areas. There's also, by the way, the social care precept that's going to be put on top of the council tax, like an Osborne tax, if you like, on top of the council tax. There's about 2% or something
2%.
coming in. So, you know, the picture isn't quite as rosy as some of these top-level Tory politicians. Not Nick, we'll have you believe.
Deprivation and rurality are the key issues for Leicester and for Leicestershire. We get nothing under the rurality formula at all. Now, Leicestershire, you would think, is fairly rural. We get nothing on that, and they don't respect our areas of deprivation. Now, I admit,
What is that fund, and how does that work, though?
Who
the
knows?
Rurality fund?
Who knows how it works? We don't get anything. But I know I've got pockets of deprivation in Loughborough, Colville, on the outskirts of Leicester, and then you've got Leicester itself. The formula needs to respect deprivation and rurality.
Well, it sounds like you're both in agreement on that one, that's for sure. Well, next, the incredible rise of Leicester City. They're due to play Arsenal today in a top-of-the-league clash. No, you've not tuned to Match of the Day by accident, but experts say footballing success can translate into economic and political success too. Our political editor, Tony Roe, a self-confessed lifelong Leicester fan, has been taking a look at what the achievements of his beloved Foxes mean for the East Midlands.
November 1971, a 3-0 home win against Newcastle United, my first Leicester City game. After that, I was hooked.
Come on, City!
Now, remarkably, the success on the pitch could well hook in new supporters for the whole city. Leicester have gone global.
Leicester City's progress is being followed eagerly in India, and it is first big club outside, say, the cities of London and Manchester and Liverpool perhaps, to make such a big name in the Premier League.
When you talk about Midlands engine, you're talking about connectivity to 400 or 500 million people. And sometimes when we have key matches, 1 billion people. Can you just imagine the amount of resources it takes to connect to 1 billion people around the world? It puts Leicester on the map, it puts East Midlands on the map, it puts Midlands on the map, and that's good news.
Leicester's mayor has been a fan through thick and thin. His first match was in 1968.
Certainly in the last year we've managed to attract some pretty big names. Hastings Direct have set up in the city, and of course IBM have come here. Now, I don't think that's just down to soccer, but the soccer doesn't half help.
Andy Reid, the former Loughborough MP, is now a lecturer in sports management at the town's university. He says the challenge now is to make the most of the success.
Well, clearly what we're going to do now is just make sure that we drive home that message so that people have heard of Leicester, but they also know what we offer. Hopefully the images of Leicester that are projected around the world mean that people recognise it's a great place to come and invest and to work.
It's hard to put into words what success means for fans. A tear in the eye, yes. And for the man who runs and sells the fanzine, it may help. Falling sales meant last season he almost called it a day.
Things haven't gone up that much, but there's a bit more interest, yeah. A lot of the people who come along are sort of new faces a bit, but all welcome. It's nice to see it full.
Leicester's loud sell-out crowds are looking up, heeding the manager's advice not to look down for fear of falling. A win today would be another important step on the world stage for the whole city.
Well, joining us is Neil Sheriff, a lecturer in European business at De Montfort University, who's also a Leicester fan. They're everywhere, it seems. Neil, from an economic perspective, what kind of impact can the success of Leicester City Football Club have?
Well, you have to look at it in terms of the short term, the long term points of view, and the direct and indirect benefits.
What about the medium term? I'm interested in that.
Well, in the medium term, then we need to ensure that Leicester City remain in an excellent position, and that the city reflects that, and that the performance of the businesses, that the new audiences that come to Leicester see perform excellently and retain that position, rather like Leicester City must remain excellent too.
There's no pressure then, is there?
No.
But how does Leicester cash in, and the East Midlands cash in on its current success?
We heard in the film about the 100 million customers worldwide that they were able to connect to. That reputation is spread far and wide. That needs to be capitalised on, and also to follow on from the tourism boost that, of course, that the Richard III concept brought forward. But of course, the other thing we must take into account is the fact that people in the city feel great.
Yes,
and
there's a buzz about it.
Research tells you that productivity increases when the people of the city are
a feel-good
happy.
factor. Yeah, definitely. OK, well, John, you've got divided loyalties here, haven't you? Of course, you're a Leicester MP.
Absolutely.
But a little bird tells me that your club are Man City. So
why have you outed me like that on national television?
Well, only about your football, but remind us how the match went. Leicester City v...
I was brought up as a Man City fan, but obviously I'm also a Leicester fan now, and it was a bit awkward following the match, but what a tremendous result for Leicester. And actually, if it's not going to be Man City, I definitely want Leicester to win the league, and I definitely want them to beat Arsenal in this game.
OK, so how could this make the difference for Leicester's profile?
It's massive for Leicester. I mean, when I speak to the university vice-chancellors, they tell me that when Premiership football is in the city, you know, the applications go up. I mean, having Premiership football attracts people. People want to come and live in the city. They want to come and work in the city if they've got Premiership football on their doorstep. And it is, as you say, it's absolutely tremendous for the city, and that's why I'm entirely behind Leicester. And I want them to. I do actually want them to win. Of course, I want them to win. I definitely want them to win.
Just don't tell Man City. Shh. Anyway, let me just tell you, Nick, that fanzine seller that we saw in Tony's report there, he's already been interviewed by the New York Post, the Sydney Morning Herald, India Today, and apparently 3 times by the Himalayan Times. So it's having a massive impact, isn't it?
It is. It's the reason Leicester has succeeded is the team spirit, right from the owners who spend money every week putting on these clackers and magazines and banners and that sort of stuff.
Are you a fan?
Certainly am. Right through to the team. When you see them coming off after they'd thrashed Man City, they're all patting each other on the back. You know, there's no prima donnas at Leicester City.
OK. So can Leicestershire and Leicester cash in on this?
Well, we're certainly doing our best. And we as a Leicestershire and Leicester City, we do like to work as a team. So when you do the Richard III stuff, we've got the battlefield and the museum in Leicestershire. We've got the cathedral in the city. Sir Peter built the museum in the city. What we're trying to do is turn it into a whole day, so people come up to Leicester and Leicestershire and spend the whole day there. And if we can do a couple of other things, the secret in tourism is to get them to stay overnight.
Absolutely, yeah.
Because then they buy a meal, they have a beer, and they go shopping.
Yeah.
Sounds like Leicester's on the up as far as this is concerned.
Absolutely, completely on the up. It's now obviously the premier city of the East Midlands, soon to be the premier city of the whole Midlands itself as well.
They might disagree with you in Nottingham and Derby.
Well, you know, what have they got? You know, a city massively on the up, and it's great for the city. It's great for the economy, and actually, by the way, it's good that we have Labour Leicester City Council working so closely with Conservative Leicestershire County Council on this together. It does show
never thought I'd hear you say
exactly.
that.
It does show you that politicians can put their partisan differences aside
when it
and
comes
work
to football.
when it comes to football, but also for the good of the wider community. And that's a good thing.
Yeah,
he's absolutely right, and I do work closely with Peter and on things where we share a common goal, and economic development, the well-being of our people, the entertainment, the public realm. They're all important to all people, whether you're Labour, Conservative or even Liberal.
Well, they say football brings people together, don't they, Neil? What do you make of this entente cordiale in the studio?
Well, I think it's an example of what the city needs to do, and De Montfort University and Leicester City have a strategic partnership, and the creative ways of approaching the future and to develop the reputation of the city and the institutions is the way forward. And I think if the cooperation we see here, quite surprising, could be lessons taken from that and applied to all the other institutions and the businesses and the organisations in the city, that would be a great thing for the future, that we could capitalise on the feel-good factor and the influence and the spread of the reputation. It's no longer where the hell is Leicester, by the way. It's, we
it's
know
on the
where
map.
it is.
It's on
Absolutely.
the map. So how is De Montfort University, your university, making the most of this too?
Well, we have a strategic partnership with Leicester City where a number of ex-students become interns and learn about the sports business.
Okay.
We also have visitors from a partnership universities in China spending time actually being trained by the Leicester City training staff, and absolutely magnificent hosts they were too. But it goes beyond that. We have tickets, of course, for our students who can go along and get access to the feel-good factor in Leicester City.
Neil, thanks very much indeed for coming into the studio.